up, dogs? Well, I've just been doing a bit of work on the CBR. I've just gotten round to fitting Crash Bobbins. Check that out. Looks good and should hopefully do the job. So what's involved in fitting Crash Bobbins then? Well, the one on the other side was dead easy. All I really did was unscrew the old engine bolt from the chassis and put the new bolt through the crash bobbin and bolt it on and do it up to the correct torque, which on the CBR is 28 foot-pounds on this side and 32 foot-pounds on the other side. No idea what it is in Newton meters because I don't work in Newton meters. And that's basically it. It's just one bolt out, a different bolt in, so it's really pretty easy. On that side, this side is a little bit more difficult because on this side on the other side there's two bolts, one up here and one down there, and on this side there's only one bolt. So when I took it out, because there's a ever so slight bit of flex in the chassis, just a tiny bit, and I couldn't get the bolt back in because it wouldn't line up. The hole through the chassis didn't line up with the hole through the engine. So what I did was, as you can see, I broke out my trolley jack, which I haven't used for a little while because of not owning a car these days, and just put it under the engine and just jacked the engine up a tiny little bit, just enough to get the bolt in. The bolt was also kind of difficult to get in because it was a bit kind of dirty in the threads. So what I did was shot a bit of WD-40 into there, and it just, after that, it went in dead easy. These are the old engine bolts. The old engine bolts are like a hex fitting like that, 14mm hex. I think they're like, I don't know, I think they're M8 or M10 or something like that. And then the new ones, obviously because they're sunk right down into the bobbin, you can't get a hex socket in there, so they make them an Allen fitting. So used my Allen bit to install them and then tighten them to the correct torque. Like I say, 32 foot-pounds this side, 28 the other. Again, it'll be a bit higher torque on this side because there's only one bolt. On the other side you've got the two engine bolts. You've got the one at the bottom, you've got that one up there, so that's why it's slightly low. They're both 28 foot-pounds. So that's pretty much it. So I think it looks really good. Kind of suits the bike, obviously, because it's a naked bike. It's a good idea to have some engine protection. If it had the fairing on and you come off it, the fairing protects the engine cases to some extent, depending how bad the accident is. But stand back a bit. Yeah, I like it. I think it looks good. And they were about £23 off eBay. About 22 pounds and some pence, and free postage. So that was for the bobbins themselves and the bolts to hold them on. Now notice, oh yeah, the other thing I was going to mention was my expansion tank. This Easy Bleed / Monster expansion tank. This was originally mounted. People who've watched a lot of my videos will know. This was mounted up here, and it was basically just cable tied on the chassis with a couple of big cable ties. And it's kind of just like sitting on top of the radiator top hose. Now, obviously, to fit the bobbin, I've had to move it. So what I did was I went to Halfords. I spent £4 on a cycle rack. Not a cycle rack. What am I talking about? A cycle bottle holder is what I'm trying to say. Which is this thing here. It's alloy, and it was just £4, so not expensive. Unfortunately, it's not actually quite the right size for a monster can. As you can see, there's actually a gap between the can and the frame. However, what I've done is I've used a Jubilee clip, and I've basically the cycle holder is bolted to one of these engine screw holes here. Don't actually know what these are for. They might be for attaching the radiator or possibly the fairing or something, I don't know. But anyway, what I've done, you can't really see it from here, but the cycle holder is basically bolted onto that with an Allen bolt. I think it's like an M6 or something, I can't remember, but anyway, it's bolted on there. And then what I've done is I've Jubilee clipped it to the back of the cycle holder with a big meaty Jubilee clip, so it's not going anywhere, and it looks so much better. If you just stand back, get an idea of how that looks. That's how these kind of expansion tanks, it's quite common on a Street Fighter to have one of these expansion tanks. It's like a can or a bottle or something of that nature, but they are usually mounted like that, kind of just behind the radiator. A lot of people mount them kind of about here, but obviously in my case I mounted it there, but it still looks okay. Looks a lot better than having it sat there, and also you can see a bit more of the engine. So I'm really pleased with that. That just looks the absolute business. So yeah, so that's it. Now the other thing is, see, the funny thing about these Crash Bobbins, in Britain we call them Crash Bobbins. In the United States they call them frame sliders, and I've also heard them called crash mushrooms, I guess because they look slightly like a mushroom, which is kind of strange. So what do you guys call them? Anyone want to put anything in the comments? Alright, well that's great. Thanks very much for watching.